This case here is high on my list for new SFF case of the year. Today, let's do a powerful build in this one. Welcome to Machines and More. So maybe you've been waiting for a good time to jump in and build or pick up some components. Black Friday sales is not a bad time to do some shopping. It's that time of the year when components and things like that, they start going on sale, some really special deals. So hopefully you'll be able to grab a deal on perhaps a CPU and maybe a GPU if you're looking for something like that, or your other main components. I often do more budget-oriented or mid-tier builds where we try to maximize the budget, but today let's do something a little bit different. I haven't done a build guide yet for the Fractal Era 2, so let's do it with this really lovely case, and we'll throw in a high-end motherboard, high-end CPU for more of your power user rendering or workstation uses here. This one here, Midnight Blue version that I reviewed. Let's just walk through these steps as a whole, and then I'll come back and I'll talk about how this build works. So one thing, if you are doing some shopping, please do consider using our affiliate links down below. And if you're picking up anything, that really helps out the channel here. I appreciate your support. This is Fractal's Era 2. It's a really impressive case. I really enjoyed reviewing this one. It was a lot of fun to work with, so that's what we're going to be using for this build today. To open up the case, we're just going to pull out this dust filter over here. You don't have to pull it out all the way. It just has to come out part way, and then you can lift this shell off. Okay. And we're going to keep the shell off for the majority of the build. We'll just put this back, reverse the process at the very end. This is a sandwich style case, so it has two sides. This side is the GPU side. It's got the riser cable mount right here. And that's all that's going to go on this side. We also have on this end, this is where the power supply is going to go. This is where your motherboard is going to go. This case has more of a AIO focus, and you don't have to necessarily run one, but it's kind of designed around it. You have more space for that radiator, so that's what this cage up here is for, and it does pop off pretty easily. You can take this off, you can keep it on. It should not interfere too much with stuff. We'll take it off for now. One thing you can do with this case is flip the case fans around. So by default, the case fans are installed in an intaking position. If you switch it to exhaust at the bottom, you can get better thermal performance. The stock fans do have dust management as part of the airflow consideration there. So either way, the case thermals are pretty good. So you can't really, if you care about dust management, then I'd say, yeah, definitely keep that as an intaking position, because otherwise, if you're exhausting, all the side panels are not filtered. So that's just going to bring dust into the case, and then you'll exhaust into this thing, which means the dust is going to get stuck here. So either way, if you want a little bit better thermals, you can do it this way. With this case, you do have a few options. There's position 1, 2, and 3, and that sets the position of the divider. We're going to give the GPU side the most room because we don't actually need that much space. We're not running an air cooler, so it makes sense. The GPU we're going to be running is going to be a thicker one. If you have a thinner GPU, you could consider shifting it so that the GPU is drawing more directly from the outside side panels. So that's one consideration there. If you're adjusting it, just go ahead and loosen up the screw. Here we are just making sure everything's tightened down in that widest position. The other screw is going to be on this end over here, kind of the same setup here. So there's 3. You want to make sure everything's aligned, and they're indexed, so that's pretty easy. Okay. So for example, 2 and 2 and 2 on the back, or 1 on everything. For our components today, we'll start with this motherboard. This is ASUS's X70i. Currently, this is the highest end AM5 ITX option that you can get in the current generation. One big reason you might want to get this is the abundant I/O. It has tons of high-speed ports on this one. It's also got Wi-Fi 7. It unfortunately is still only 2.5 GE, but for I/O power users, this is going to be the board to get. It does have a little bit of a quirk with, because of this guy here, it's an add-on card that you most likely will want to use if you are want the full suite of front panel connectors. In this build, we actually only need 2, so if you don't want the LED, it's actually not a big deal for the power button. Okay, if I unscrew the heatsink, and underneath here is where your top M.2 drive will sit. You can definitely go with a Gen 5 drive if you have the budget for it or you need the speed. Gen 4 drives are actually a very good option right now. There's still plenty of fast ones. And if you need a lot of storage, even the 4 terabyte ones are not prohibitively expensive right now, around $200 to $300 depending on the speed. So one thing I will note is that if you're installing a Gen 5 drive, you're going to actually do it on this side here, and that's going to be installed like that. Okay, that's because this is the Gen 5 slot. The top one is Gen 4. Of course, if you did manage to put a Gen 5 drive into there, which it will work perfectly fine just at Gen 4 speeds, we'll just go ahead and insert our drive here. And this is the Q latch 2, I think this is. Make sure the thermal pad does not have the plastic on it. We can just put this back on here. CPU for this build is the 9900X. Now prices have come down pretty dramatically since the launch, and it's not actually even that long ago. Well under $400 now, and possibly even better with the Black Friday deals. I have no idea what those are going to look like at the time I'm filming this, but hopefully even better Black Friday cyber discounts. This one's got 12 cores. You could go for a 9950X if the price is good. It seems like the 9900X is by far the better deal right now. And so 12 cores, still plenty of cores for a workstation, and actually still very good for gaming as well if you want to do a little bit of that on the side. In fact, this is still a very, very competent gaming CPU. We can just go ahead and mount that up. And one thing I highly recommend, I don't know how well this will come through on the camera, but this is the thermal paste guard. We just put this here. I will have links for something like that if you want. For our RAM kit, I've got Clev's Cras V. This is a higher speed kit. It's a 7200 megahertz kit, and it's actually perfectly fine to go with a 6000 or 6400 megahertz kit. Because past that point you get diminishing returns. But if you do want something faster, given that this is more of your higher end build, then this is totally something you can splurge on. 48 gigabyte kit. I think I'd say for this type of build, a minimum of 32, 64 would be even better. So we'll just go ahead and we'll line this up this way. Make sure the RAM slots are open. I'll just make sure you hear that click. And we'll repeat the same on the other DIMM. All right. We're going to prep our board right now for the cooler. I've already taken off the AMD stock bracket there. We don't really need that anymore. So we'll just go ahead and insert the standoffs in. The AIO that we're using for this build is Cooler Master's Atmos 240, which is a great unit. So with this done, we've got those in, we can go ahead and place the board into the case, but there's one thing on the case we're gonna do first before we put the board in. This is our power supply's CPU EPS cable. Okay, this is gonna snake underneath this here. I've run it around the back here and underneath the motherboard mounting area. And the reason this is important is because we want to plug it in right here in this corner. And then we can kind of let it hang out until we can get the board in, and then we'll manage it up here. Okay, and then all these other cables will be plugging in shortly. We're gonna turn the board upside down. This is an inverted board build. And before we push it down all the way, while you're still here, it's a little bit easier to do it right now than to wait till the very end. Just plug this guy in. So the first thing that I plugged in here is the front panel header on the FPS2 card. This is the power button header, and these are the power button LED, and this is the only two that you need for this build. The USB-A header goes over here. It's a little notch, just line that up. USB-C header here. This guy here is the front panel audio, and unfortunately you don't need it because this board does not have a front panel or any audio solution that's built in, because it uses an external device for audio. So we're just gonna tuck that in over here. Not gonna use it. Okay. We do have the case fans. They're on a daisy chained cable. All right, so what we can do is you can plug it into the case fan header. You're only gonna have two. The AIO fans are gonna be on a separate header. So we'll just go ahead and plug this on the one that's furthest over. If you were looking at in this position, it'd be the first header, number one. You'll notice I haven't screwed this down yet. Sometimes it can actually help to snake some of these cables underneath the board. It can go a long way to making the build look a lot better. Of course, it is covered, so you may not care. The case has a little bit of a lip under here that can keep the cables tidy, so we'll try to use that as much as possible. But later on, when we get our power supply cables in, that'll actually be a little bit more useful to kind of tie everything up that way. Once you're happy with the placement of the cables and all that, we can go ahead and just screw the board down. You don't need to keep it loose anymore. Got 4 632 screws here. We're going to do our power supply now. We're going to unscrew this and we'll pull this cage out, and I'll show you the power supply. Power supply here is ASUS's low-key 750 watt unit, SFX-L. It's a little bit taller than your standard SFX unit, but we will still have ample clearance for the Rad and the fans that we're using today. This is a 750 watt platinum unit that I have here. So the way this is going to go in, it's going to go in with the fan facing this way. So we're going to make sure that the screw is here, and then it'll slide in like that. Okay, so like this. There's more holes. There's 6 in total. You really don't need that many. 4 is a good number. So just put your power supply screws in. Before we place the power supply in, we can go ahead and just make sure that these cables aren't going to be in the way. We're just going to slide it in right there. I'm going to go ahead and insert the 24-pin ATX cable. It looks like this. This is the motherboard end. And that's just going to insert into this corner here. And it's supported from the other side. We're just going to make sure it clicks. And it's a little bit longer, so we'll have some excess cable to manage up here. Okay, we are going to have to plug in our AC cable. Just make sure the power supply switch is in the on position there. It's very easy to pull it back out if we need to. Right now we can just attach it so it doesn't move. I'm going to turn the case up so I don't want it to like fall out. We don't have too many cables to plug in. The first one is going to be our CPU or PCIe. We'll just put that one here. We're not going to use a PCIe power cable. We're going to be using a 12V HPWR cable. We'll plug in our motherboard cable. It says MB. Just do these. We'll just try to keep everything neat, but we'll manage it up. Okay. So like I mentioned, you do have quite a bit of extra cable. One little trick here. If your zip tie is too short, we can actually join 2 zip ties together and make one very long zip tie. When 2 tweezers become 1. And we can go ahead and plug in the riser cable. Gone ahead and managed up our PSU cables. And this is just the EPS cable and the 24-pin cable. And we can add the 12V HPWR cable. This says there's a PSU end. We're just going to go ahead and plug that in right here. Now, if you are using a GPU that uses 8-pin cables, You don't have to use this. So this will actually manage up around this end of the power supply. I'm just going to tuck that cable into here. I guess we actually do not need nearly that much cable. That'll serve as a little home for that. One thing I always like to do is just make sure nothing's in the way of the fans. Just give them a quick spin. So if you popped off the rad panel earlier, you have that right now. This arrow points to the front of the case, and the front of the case is the power supply end. We're going to align the barb side of the radiator with that arrow side. And this is a 240, so we're not going to be using the outer holes. Okay, we're going to leave this loose. We're going to fine tune the position a little bit. On the pump block, you want to make sure that you've got the AM4 hardware installed. Just put these in and then screw from right here. 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. If you want the RGB, you can just daisy chain your cables, and then you can plug this end here to your motherboard. We're going to run a splitter cable so that we can bridge the fan PWM power and signal from one header to 2 fans. CPU header is the gray one here. And we'll just snake these up through here. Make sure that that thermal paste guard is still in place. We'll apply some thermal paste here. And we'll just plug in the pump to the AIO pump header. Okay, if you want the RGB for the pump, you can plug that in. Just place this on top. You don't have to mount the rad yet. Got 4 screws here. And I do want to emphasize it's very important to tighten these down properly. Okay. And we don't have to install the radiator yet. I'm just going to flip the case around. Installing our graphics card. If your build doesn't have serious GPU rendering needs and it's more of a CPU sled, then just pick based on your gaming needs. The tough card I have here, this is the 4070 Super. I showed you guys this last week. It doesn't have to be this card for this build. It comes in many flavors. You can get a 4060 Ti, up to a 4090. But one thing to keep in mind for the tough cards, the 4080 Super and 4090, and I believe the 4080 also, those tough cards are too long for this case. Also, they're very thick. The 4070 Super, it's going to be what you can fit in here. And it's a nice middle ground here, fits well in the case. It has a max GPU length of 326 millimeters. So to pop the card in, we're just gonna actually, you're gonna remove the 2 expansion slots over here. Just make sure that's free. Insert it in there. You do want to pay close attention. There's these 2 little prongs here. Make sure those are actually slotted in. Okay, and then up here we've got our 12V HPWRs. We'll just plug that in like this. All right. After you've got that mounted in, we can just screw the card in. Radiator here. Go ahead and just pop it in here. Plug our fans in here. And again, if you want that RGB, you can go ahead and just do that. The AIO tubes can sit up here like this. We're going to use that little bracket. I'll keep it flat. Okay, this will sit straight into the, when the cover comes down, it'll kind of help hold that in place. But our cables otherwise are connected up. The point of leaving this loose was to kind of find a happy place for it. It's going to naturally sit into the position that the tubes like to sit in. We don't want to force it into some unnatural or kinked position. Let me just tighten these down, get there. So that's this here, X870i, 9900X, low-key SFXL power supply, and the 4070 tough card. And one thing I really wish is that Fractal had gone with a 90-degree cable here. It makes a very weird turn here, but you just make sure that it's clear of your fans. Everything looks like it's spinning freely. So we can go ahead and close this up, which is just reversing what we did earlier. Make sure you have that dust filter pulled out a little bit. You do want to make sure that dust filter pops back there, because if not, this is going to just slide off when you pick it up. Overall, this is a very capable CPU heavy power build. The Fractal Era 2 has much better thermals than Era 1, and this system with the airflow setup that I showed you here, it'll cool the 9900X without any concerns. Heavy blender render here. The CPU is drawing down 163 watts at stock PBO settings. This is typical for the CPU. The temps here are excellent. The rad fans are not maxed out yet, 1900 RPM, so you still have some headroom. CPU is getting boost clocks that are just a tad less than when I had the 9900X on a 360 in my mini-itx test system, but it's practically going to be the same. Atmos 240 does a really good job here. GPU limited gaming, Red Dead 2 here at higher settings, 80 plus FPS, nice and quiet system. This really can do it all. Thermals are fantastic here. Cooler fans are running at roughly 1400 RPM here. In a more CPU limited scenario, 1440p gaming and Far Cry 6, the CPU is going to see a lot more utilization, so you're going to see a little bit higher temps here, but they're still perfectly fine. For gaming, this setup will let you get pretty much everything you want out of the 9900X. So there you have it. This is the Fractal Era 2 power user build. Cost-wise, at current prices, it's going to be somewhere upwards of 2K, 2200 maybe, depending on what storage you end up choosing. But I think this is a fantastic compact workstation build here, and really hope you can snag a few deals in this shopping season. So I hope you enjoyed it. Lots of SFF content here on this channel, so please subscribe if you love that. Give a like as well. Support us by using the shopping links down below. Big thanks for watching.